So let's take a deeper dive into the transportation sector and specifically electric vehicle fleets and the EV charging market as it applies to agrivoltaic storage systems. And what we want to really highlight here is that we're talking about co-locating with solar generation, energy storage, and also creating a lot of really wonderful covered parking for the EV charging systems. So this is one of the many different forecasts of the market share increase of electric vehicles out to 2030. And regardless of which analysis, we can see there's a huge amount of electric vehicles that are going to be coming in to our communities. And according to Reuters, they say that US automakers aspire to have 50% of all of their sales be electric vehicles by 2030. And so not only do we have a huge increase in the number of electric vehicles, but we're at a very special time where we have a very broad selection of electric vehicles, where, previously it's been mostly sedans and a couple of SUVs and very few light trucks. Now we have everything from heavy trucks and vans and buses and semis. And then in the agricultural sector, we have tractors and loaders and lifts and construction equipment. And then in all of the smaller vehicles like UTVs and ATVs and watercraft, and we have airplanes. So we have this huge amount of electric vehicles that are going to be coming to be able to be utilized within our electric vehicle fleets. And so one of the couple of core challenges we have with this huge increase in the electric vehicle market is, one, where are they all going to be charged? And two, where's all the power and energy going to come from to really satisfy this huge demand increase? So looking from the national level, through the Investment in Jobs Act, there's a program called NEVI, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, in which the federal government allotted $7.5 billion that then flows down for the states to integrate their own program in combination with an entire electric vehicle corridor for the nation. And so NEVI's targeted to create 500,000 ultra-fast EV charging stations along the nation's corridors, 134 interstates, 125 U.S. highways and state roads covering 166,000 miles. And so from the national level, we can see an integrated approach of creating electric corridors. And then each of the individual states is outlining their own program. And this is a great example of a regional opportunity, including 14 states called Drive Electric USA, from states all the way on the East Coast through the Midwest to the Rocky Mountains, and then integrating with a specific program that we'll look at in the Utah Market Intelligence Analysis called Drive Electric Utah. So we have national programs and state programs. And while these just came online 1 or 2 years ago, many of them are still in the process of being developed and implemented, which creates a huge opportunity for us to be able to co-locate with agrivoltaic storage systems. And this is a seminal study that was done by the state of Oregon to say, well, how can we really solve this problem of the increase in electric vehicles? And what they'd found is it's relatively easy in the larger urban areas because of the existing electrical infrastructure and that they have more power and energy coming there. But the rural areas present a specific challenge because, one, there's a lot higher density of market share of electric vehicles in urban areas. So we don't have as many electric vehicles in the rural areas, but also from the centralized energy system approach, we have to increase our ability to provide that power from the existing generation. And then you have to upgrade the transmission to pull all that power out to these rural areas. And what this study found is that the answer is co-location of agrivoltaics with EV charging at farms and ranches. And amazingly, requiring only 3% of the total land, they could meet 86% of the rural highway access points throughout the state. So this is an incredible study, and they do a profile of it at the link of nature.com. And while Oregon has taken this first step, one of the huge opportunities would be for every state to do their own analysis to say, how could our farms and ranches with agrivoltaic storage systems help us solve the problem of all of these electric vehicles coming into the marketplace? So when we look at installing an EV charging system at an agrivoltaic generation and storage at a farm and ranch, we can see a whole spectrum of other benefits that come. First, when you create a utility scale agrivoltaic system that's using a PPA to sell that solar to the local cooperative or to the community solar program, or even to the investor-owned utility, that's going to be a very regulated contract over 25 years. And while every state and every market is unique, you'll generally see that you'll be paid for every kilowatt, maybe 3 to upwards of 10 cents per kilowatt. And solar financing is very clear and well understood now. So that will pencil for all of the capital invested and for the tax credits, grants, and rebates. And it will have a healthy rate of return, maybe somewhere between 6 or 10%, every project's unique. But while the solar financing, the PPA will allow the installation for the utility scale solar generation system and energy storage, what happens is when we co-locate public EV charging and charging for guests to the farm and the ranch, we see a whole spectrum of benefits, meaning electric vehicles have a very unique demand profile. We now have electric vehicles, most of which have 100 kilowatt hours of battery storage easily, but now we have 200, 300. Some of the semis and the big vans are approaching 500 kilowatts of energy storage, and that energy wants to be jammed in incredibly fast. We now have things like the EV Hummer that can charge a 350 kilowatt hour battery pack in 10 minutes up to 80%. So that's a huge amount of energy that needs to flow in quickly. But what it opens up for a public EV charging station is another stream of revenue into the microgrid project that isn't regulated by that PPA contract, which will have healthy returns. But now we have a free market-based approach that anyone coming to your farm, you could easily charge 10 cents a kilowatt hour, 20, 50 cents a kilowatt hour. For some tourist destinations, with high visitor, you can maybe charge $1 a kilowatt hour. So we're turbocharging the economic model of the solar energy microgrid through adding another revenue stream that has a higher capacity to really bring in variable streams of revenue. But we could also see a combination of packages. For guests, maybe you offer them free charging, or if you come to the farm or ranch stand and you buy a certain amount of products, you charge for free. So this opportunity to be able to have people come to our farm for 15 minutes or for maybe an hour to charge their electric vehicles really supports the agro-tourism model and the ability to offer other products and services to people who are coming to visit your farm and ranch. And then when we look at these EV charging stations as an opportunity to create covered parking with additional generation, we can create a really wonderful environment that's protected from the elements of shade from sun and protection from snow and rain, and often the beautiful landscapes that our farms and ranches are located in. So when we take a look at the electric vehicle charging network business model, there's an incredible study that was done by NREL on EV charging and the impacts of electricity demand charges. And EV charging market is a fast expanding and a lot of interest is coming into it. And while everyone can see there's this huge wave of electric vehicles that are coming into the market, one of the challenges is they're not here yet. So you're modeling what electric vehicles could be coming, and we want to come in and be able to support that coming but unclear demand. But one of the amazing parts that this report shows is that a lot of electric vehicle charging locations don't pencil economically for a couple of reasons. And what they break down here is the example cost of each charge breakdown in dollars per kilowatt hours looking at all of the different expenses, and they look at many different charging types. So there'd be level 1, level 2, or ultra fast EV charging. And they looked at urban adjacent, and rural business models. But what they found is if you currently put in an electric vehicle charging station that's on leased land where you're paying to lease it from the property owner and you're buying energy from the grid, it actually doesn't pencil very well because of demand charges and time of use. And you can see we have highlighted here the blue and the gray, that when you try and charge EVs who want all of that energy really fast, particularly in the afternoons in grids that have time of use and demand charges, because you want a lot of energy and you wanted that time of day, it's 45% of that expense is actually going to those two charges. But when we co-locate with solar generation and storage, we can totally eliminate that category. So in addition to electric vehicle charging stations, combined with agrivoltaics as a solution to our geolocation problem, and where is the energy going to come from to satisfy that new demand, we can actually create an incredibly vibrant and successful model, because with located solar generation and storage, we can totally eliminate those demand charges, taking something that doesn't pencil economically and make it incredibly financially successful. And then also, when you install it at the farm or ranch, you don't need to pay a lease because you're putting it on the property owner's land. So moving out of the EV charging network and the broader charging problem, let's look at ranch and farm fleet electrification. So there's a huge opportunity to transform ranch and farm fleets to being fully electric operations. And this is a significant part of the microgrid solution because of a number of different factors. First, because when you put in an electric vehicle, you can totally reduce fleet expenses and increase revenue, meaning switching from diesel or gas can eliminate 100% of the fuel and radically reduce the maintenance and maintenance time costs, because electric vehicles just don't have all of the pumps and the filters. And we can also time when we charge our farm and ranch fleets for optimal price reduction if we're in an energy arbitrage with the grid, or we're trying to sell power to the grid when it wants it and there's a higher revenue opportunity. We already discussed revenue from public EV charging because we can eliminate the demand and time of use charges and lease expenses, but also because we can have a total reduction of pollution and emissions at the farm and ranch. And as someone who grew up farming and ranching and has worked on many farms or ranches, if anyone's worked on a tractor with that big exhaust stack blowing right back into the face of the farmer or rancher, and particularly if we're doing organic farming where we're very conscious of not putting any toxins and pollutions, we've now eliminated all of that pollution and expense and created a much safer and healthier experience for the farmers, ranchers, and equipment operators. We're not spewing toxic chemicals all over our croplands and our soils, and how it impacts all life surrounding our farms and ranches. And we're not putting those pollutants into the atmosphere. But we can also look at using vehicle to grid to stabilize the grid. Every electric vehicle is a large battery. And while we have a whole spectrum of vehicles that we've outlined here below, whether it's a semi or a van or a tractor or a forklift or a boom, even in a really successful operation, you're doing good if you can get that vehicle operating 8 to 10 hours a day. But the reality is most vehicles are not being used that every day. They sit, best cases, 12 to maybe 14, or some vehicles maybe sit all day because there's no need to use it. So the batteries in those vehicles can be utilized to provide storage to the microgrid and can be used in combination with the energy storage in the microgrid to help us really do optimal energy arbitrage or reduce expenses for the facility. So let's take a look at a really innovative company that's called Grid Tractor. And while they focused on farms and ranches and tractors, what their model that they show here really kind of highlights how electric vehicles can be utilized in a solar generation and microgrid. So here in the nighttime, the tractors are charging up. And then as the solar systems come online, they're beginning to feed in to the grid system, and the tractors go out and operate, and the solar generation is ramping up. Then they come back for a break, and the tractors top off their batteries because we're getting a lot of solar generation in, and that excess is being sold back to the grid. In the afternoon, the tractors go back out to work, and the irrigation systems are being utilized, all from the solar generation. And then as we get into the afternoon, the solar generation drops. Generally, power prices will drop, and then we bring those tractors back and we sell that additional energy back into the grid. And then again, the whole process repeats overnight. So this opportunity to use vehicle to grid and our EV fleets as an integrated part is an enormous opportunity. But in addition, we can also see from a capital perspective, there's a wonderful opportunity of how we can really integrate electric vehicle fleets. So here we're going to look at a larger ranch and farm, and where they put in 6 different electric vehicles. And so we've just put some general costs that are reflective of the market. There's a lot of options, and there's a ton of different vehicles out there. So when you look at a delivery van, a heavy duty pickup truck, a light to a mid-size electric pickup truck, large tractor, mid-size tractor, and then we get an electric UTV, that brings a total to $305,000, which is a sizable investment. But currently there's a federal tax credit for the electric vehicles that qualify, which year one, we get a $37,500 tax credit. But this is amazing if we total up, again, using some averages from existing vehicles, we get 770 kilowatt hours of energy storage now integrated into our microgrid. And this works for energy arbitrage, but also in a grid down scenario, each one of these electric vehicles is their own mobile microgrid. Now, meaning all of them can go out and can receive solar power, or they can be utilized as a mobile microgrid to export power at all sorts of locations. And then if we use a comparison to say, well, what's a general reduction in the diesel and fuel expenses? So again, we're using some average numbers, and then based on the gallons of fuel, based on the miles per gallon or diesel equivalent, we used a $5 cost of fuel. And depending on what state you're in, we've seen all the way up to $7 or $8, but $5 is a good general measure. We can see that annually that would save $21,000 for these same electric or same vehicles as gas or diesel equivalents. And over 5 years, that saves $105,000. So investing $305,000 over 5 years in integrating the fuel savings, that would reduce it down to $161,000 in net. And this isn't taking into account any of the local or state grants or rebates, which could also be applied. So let's look at a smaller farmer ranch example, just repeating the same thing. We get a heavy duty pickup, a large tractor, that's $185,000 with a $15,000 tax credit. But even with just 3 vehicles, we're getting 390 kilowatt hours of energy storage to be integrated. Using the same numbers, that's $7,500 a year in savings. Over 5 years, that's $37,000. So off of $185,000, we can see a net cost of $132,000. And this isn't counting any additional revenue that we could create from having these vehicles inside of the microgrid. Thank you for taking the time to view this section of the United States Agrivoltaic Energy Storage and EV Microgrid Market Intelligence Analysis. Really deeply hope that you found this really valuable and hopefully inspiring. And if you're not watching the entire section on butterflypower.org, really encourage you to come and see all sections to get the totality of this amazing opportunity. And regardless of what channel you're finding this transmission, would be deeply appreciated if you give it some love, give it a like, and share it with a farmer or a rancher or anyone who's interested in participating in the regenerative transformation our economy, our energy sector, and our environment. Any investors who are looking at an amazing opportunity to transform their capital into the regenerative future. And it's just a deep honor and blessing to be here in this time and to participate in this great work. And we are the butterfly generation. It's time to rise and shine, time to transform and fly.